You know that feeling when you think you've got air travel figured out and then something completely throws you off? That happened to me 3 times in the past 6 months, and I realized the airport experience is quietly evolving in ways that can catch even experienced travelers off guard. I'm not talking about dramatic overhauls or conspiracy theories, just practical changes that airports and airlines have been rolling out that can impact your trip if you're not aware of them. Some of these I learned about the easy way. Others, well, let's just say I wish I'd known ahead of time. The thing is, these changes aren't necessarily bad. Some are actually improvements. But when you're rushing through an airport with a tight connection or trying to make an important meeting, any surprise can throw off your whole travel rhythm. And as frequent travelers, we tend to go into autopilot mode, doing things the way we've always done them. Here are 7 changes I've encountered recently that are worth knowing about. Nothing earth-shattering, but the kind of heads-up that can save you time, confusion, or unexpected fees. Discovery number 1. The solo booking price mystery. This one caught me completely by surprise when I was booking a last-minute business trip to Chicago. I pulled up the airline website, put in my details for 1 passenger, and saw the price. Then, just out of curiosity, I changed it to 2 passengers to see if there were any deals for traveling with someone. The price per person dropped by almost $40. Same flight, same day, same everything, except now I was booking for 2 instead of 1. I thought it was a glitch, so I called the airline. Turns out some carriers have been experimenting with what they call accompanied travel pricing. Basically, if you book multiple seats together, even if you're not sitting together, you might get a lower per-person rate. The customer service rep couldn't really explain the logic behind it. Something about group booking algorithms and seat inventory management. When I asked if I could book 2 seats and just not use one, she said that wasn't allowed. So basically, flying solo sometimes costs more, and there's not much you can do about it directly. Here's what I've learned to do. Always check the price for 2 passengers, even if you're traveling alone. If there's a significant difference, you might want to ask a friend or family member if they're planning any trips to the same destination. You could book together and maybe both save money. I've also noticed this happens more often on shorter domestic routes than longer international flights. And the price difference seems to be biggest during off-peak travel times when the airlines are trying to fill seats. It's weird, but apparently it's a thing now. At least knowing about it means you won't be as surprised as I was, and you might even find a way to work it to your advantage. Discovery number 2. Power banks. I learned this one during a flight to Seattle when a flight attendant politely asked me to move my power bank from the overhead bin to somewhere she could see it. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong, but she explained there are new guidelines about keeping charging devices visible during flight. Apparently, there was a safety incident earlier this year involving a power bank overheating, and now many airlines prefer that you keep them in sight, either in the seat pocket, on your tray table, or in your personal item under the seat in front of you. The flight attendant was really nice about it and explained that if something starts getting hot or acting weird, they need to be able to spot it and deal with it quickly. Makes total sense when you think about it that way. She mentioned they've had a few instances where passengers had to be asked to unplug devices that were getting warm. Now, I always pack my power bank in my personal item instead of my carry-on that goes overhead. It's actually more convenient because I can get to it easily when I need it, and I don't have to worry about any mid-flight requests to move things around. The other thing I learned is to never leave power banks plugged in and charging unattended, especially overnight in hotel rooms. It's just a good general practice that's become even more important now. Discovery number 3. Smart luggage is getting complicated. My brother-in-law learned this one the hard way when TSA wouldn't let him bring his new smart suitcase on board. It had a built-in battery for charging devices, GPS tracking, digital locks, the works. He was pretty excited about it, spent a decent amount of money on what he thought was the future of travel gear. Problem was, the battery couldn't be removed. TSA's rule is pretty straightforward. If your luggage has a lithium battery that can't be taken out, it can't fly. Not in the cabin, not in checked baggage. The logic is that if a battery overheats in the cargo hold, nobody can get to it to deal with the problem. What made it worse was that he didn't find this out until he was already at the airport for a family vacation. He ended up having to leave the suitcase behind and buy a regular one at the airport shop, which was both expensive and stressful. If your smart luggage does have a removable battery, you can travel with it, but the battery has to go in your carry-on bag, properly protected with the terminals covered. And it needs to be under 160 watt-hours, which rules out some of the more powerful options. You also need to be able to show TSA agents how to remove the battery if they ask. I think smart luggage is cool in theory, and some of the features are genuinely useful. But after seeing what my brother-in-law went through, I'm sticking with regular luggage for now. If you already have smart luggage, just double-check that the battery comes out, that you know how to remove it quickly, and that you know the watt-hour rating before you head to the airport. The other thing to consider is that smart luggage tends to be heavier even without the battery, so you're using up more of your weight allowance before you even start packing. Discovery number 4. Some airports are going silent. I was sitting at my gate reading when I suddenly realized I hadn't heard any announcements in over an hour. Not for boarding calls, gate changes, nothing. At first I thought maybe there was a technical problem with the speakers. When I asked at the desk, they explained that they're testing quiet terminal policies in some sections. All the information gets updated on the screens and through the airline app, but there are no loudspeaker announcements unless it's a real emergency. On one hand, it's actually pretty peaceful. You can have a phone conversation without competing with constant announcements, and the whole terminal feels calmer. On the other hand, if you're not paying attention to your phone or the departure boards, you could miss important updates about your flight. I talked to a few other travelers about this, and opinions were pretty mixed. Some people loved the quieter environment, especially if they were trying to work or rest during a long layover. Others felt anxious about potentially missing important information, particularly older travelers who weren't as comfortable relying on their phones for updates. I've started being much more proactive about checking the airline app and glancing at the departure screens regularly when I'm in these quiet zones. I also make sure my phone notifications are turned on for flight updates, and I keep the volume up so I don't miss anything. The key is just knowing which airports or terminals are doing this so you can adjust your routine accordingly. It's really not a big deal once you adjust to it, but it's definitely different if you're used to hearing everything announced. Discovery number 5. The Real ID Reality Check. Even though Real ID has been talked about for years, I'm still seeing people get surprised by it at security checkpoints. Just last month, I watched someone ahead of me in line get pulled aside because their driver's license didn't have the gold star in the upper right corner. The TSA agent was professional about it, but basically explained that a regular driver's license isn't enough for domestic flights anymore. You need either a Real ID compliant license, a passport, or one of the other approved forms of ID like a military ID or permanent resident card. What surprised me was how long the whole process took. It wasn't just a quick, "No, you can't fly." There were forms to fill out, questions to answer, and additional screening procedures. I think the person ended up missing their flight despite arriving early because the alternative verification process took almost an hour. The frustrating part for travelers is that some states were slower to roll out Real ID licenses, so people who thought they were prepared discovered their new license from 2 years ago still wasn't compliant. And getting an appointment at the DMV to upgrade can take weeks in some areas. If you haven't checked your license lately, it's worth pulling it out and looking for that gold star or Real ID marking. If it's not there, you might want to either upgrade your license or just travel with your passport. I've actually started carrying my passport for domestic flights because it tends to move faster through security anyway, and there's never any question about whether it's acceptable. The other thing to keep in mind is that this applies to anyone 18 and older, so if you're traveling with older teenagers, they need compliant ID too. It's caught some families off guard when they assumed their teen's regular license would be fine. Discovery number 6. AI scanners are really thorough. I experienced this firsthand at Denver International Airport, which has some of the new AI-powered CT scanners. The good news is you don't have to take your laptop out or remove your liquids bag, which makes the initial packing of your bins much faster and less stressful. The not-so-good news is that these scanners notice everything. My bag got flagged for what turned out to be a granola bar. Not because it was dangerous, but because the AI flagged the density pattern as something worth taking a closer look at. The TSA agent was actually pretty cool about it and explained that the new scanners are incredibly sensitive and sometimes flag things that the older machines would have ignored. What's interesting is that the AI learns over time, so certain items that get flagged frequently will eventually be recognized as harmless. But in the meantime, things like layered snacks, thick-soled shoes, and even certain electronic cables are more likely to get a second look. I've also heard from other travelers that the consistency can be weird. The same item might sail through one of these scanners at one airport and get flagged at another, depending on how the AI has been trained at that particular location. The key is just not to take it personally if your bag gets selected for additional screening. It's not that you did anything wrong. The technology is just more precise, which means more thorough. I actually think it's probably safer overall, even if it occasionally means a longer wait. My advice is to pack items that might confuse the scanner, like dense snacks or electronics with lots of cables, in easily accessible spots so you can remove them quickly if needed. And just budget a little extra time for security at airports you know have these newer machines. Discovery number 7. New passenger rights are actually helpful. This is one change that's definitely in our favor. After dealing with airline delays and cancellations for years with limited recourse, there are finally some real protections in place that actually have teeth. I found this out when my flight to Denver was delayed by 4 hours due to maintenance issues. In the past, this would have meant a lot of apologetic announcements, maybe a snack voucher, and basically just waiting it out. Instead, I automatically got a full refund credited back to my card within a week. Not a credit for future travel, but actual money back. The new Department of Transportation rules are pretty straightforward. If your domestic flight is delayed more than 3 hours, or 6 hours for international, you're entitled to a full refund, not just a credit. If you get bumped from an oversold flight, the compensation can be up to $2,150 in cash, depending on how late you arrive at your destination. What really impressed me was that I didn't have to fight for it or fill out a bunch of forms. The airline proactively sent me an email explaining my options and processed the refund automatically when I chose that over rebooking. They're also required to provide real human customer service 24/7 now, not just automated systems or outsourced call centers with limited authority. And if you're stuck on the tarmac for more than 2 hours, they have to provide food and water. After 3 hours, you have the right to get off the plane unless there's a legitimate safety reason. The rules also cover things like damaged or delayed baggage, with compensation up to $4,700 for lost bags. If it's a mobility device like a wheelchair, there's no compensation limit. I never want to deal with delays and cancellations, but it's nice to know there are actual rules protecting passengers now, instead of just hoping the airline will do the right thing. And the fact that these apply to any flight touching U.S. soil means you're covered even on international carriers. Those are the 7 changes I've noticed in my travels lately. Most of them are pretty easy to adapt to once you know about them, and some, like the new passenger rights, are actually improvements. The key is just staying aware that air travel keeps evolving, and what worked last year might not be the same this year. The good news is that none of these changes are designed to make travel harder. They're usually about safety, efficiency, or passenger protection, but like any change, they can catch you off guard if you're not expecting them. My general approach now is to always check airline websites for any updates before I travel, especially if it's been a while since my last trip. I also try to build a little extra time into my airport routine, because you never know when you'll encounter something new that takes an extra few minutes to navigate. Which of these changes surprised you most? Have you run into any of these situations during your travels, or noticed other shifts in how airports and airlines are operating? Drop a comment below. I read every single one and love hearing about what fellow travelers are experiencing out there. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to Journey Tips for more practical travel insights like this. Share this with anyone who travels frequently. These kinds of heads-ups can really save someone from unexpected surprises. Thanks so much for watching, safe travels, and I'll see you on the next Journey Tips.